everyone. Welcome. My name is Tanya Osborne. I'm the founder of the Canna Diva. The Canna Diva is a community of women supporting women at every stage of their cannabis journey, which represents the intersectionality of women in this space. And I am beyond thrilled to welcome you all to our next panel, The Science of Ingenuity through Intersectionality. So I'm super happy to be here. This conversation is super important and special to me because it not only brings together all of the brilliant minds with me, but it also highlights the incredible ways that science intersects with diversity, community, and advocacy. Today we're going to explore our panelists' unique perspectives, shaped by their diverse backgrounds, contributing to their body of knowledge. And why I'm you might be sitting here or watching us today thinking like, oh, well, Tanya must be another scientist that has contributed in great lengths to moving forward, and that is a hard no. I love this science, and I kind of stalked Miyabi to get here, so which I call the science of stalking. But it helps me as an advocate and a person in community to be able to, contribute to my stigma busting with this background of science. So let's jump right in. I'm gonna start with having each of you introduce yourselves, and then we're gonna jump into the good stuff. We're gonna talk about your journeys, your insights, and your visions of the future. So Stephen, please start.
Absolutely. My name is Stephen Philpott Jr. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I always have to start with that because that is my basis of why I'm in the industry. Through that experience that I had in the Marines, I ended up coaching in the NCAA and working as a sports scientist, studying human performance and athletes for up to a decade. Peak COVID, if you remember, really had an effect on sports. And I kind of saw where things were going. And I decided to go back to school while I was a Division I strength conditioning coach and get my master's in environmental biology to learn more about some of the science of some of the stigmatized things that we've heard about. So through that, I've co-founded the company Azisha Consulting with my business partner. We work with a lot of brands that want to talk about education, maybe how that relates to product quality.
Right.
But these things are really important to the athletic community and what they put in their bodies. So we started a lot of initiatives working with athletes to kind of continue the story.
Fantastic, thank you. Twinkle?
Hi, my name is Twinkle Paryani. I'm a research chemist, and my background is in analytical chemistry and public health. But before that, I was a stoner long before I was ever a scientist. And so I worked in public health doing tobacco research, and then I started working in the industry doing analytical testing, making COAs, and now I work for a company that abstracts tech that prioritizes cannabis research and education. So I'm doing that, and recently we published some papers on new compounds in aroma chemistry, and so we're trying to spread education about that and working with other collaborators to bring new research projects together.
Fantastic, Thank you. Av?
I'm Av Singh, and I am a regenerative organic agronomist. It's a self-made title. Fancy word for somebody who studies plants and soils. I pay the mortgage as the executive director of the Scotian Cannabis Alliance, which is just a coalition of Nova Scotia licensed producers. And I also work as a quality assurance person for several license holders in Canada and the US.
Thank you. And Marnay?
Hello, my name is Marnay Gerretson. I'm an epidemiologist by training, working in pharmaceutical health services research. My background spans the therapeutic areas of infectious diseases, neurology, oncology, and really trying to position our community to leverage their own data and champion themselves as citizen scientists for translational clinical research. And so I'm really honored to talk about my experiences in that.
All right, fantastic. So I'm gonna ask each of you a specific question, and then we're gonna just jump into like a roundtable type situation. I'm gonna start with you, Marnay. Again, you work with data-driven approaches for work, and the question is, how can data-driven approaches and lived experiences help tackle stigma or misinformation about cannabis, especially for communities that are not well represented in the standard clinical trial population?
Well, I think real world data positions itself to really be able to leverage the human experience when they're where they're at. So it provides a humanistic and holistic view of their experiences by collecting data ranging from digital health metrics through wearable devices, through self-response to questionnaires, whether they be administered at daily intervals or varying study times, but also leveraging registry data by linking their electronic health record data and insurance claim data to have a really comprehensive view of how people are not only medicating themselves, but maybe accessing traditional medical services. And so I think we are really positioning ourselves at the network of applied pharmacognosy to be able to leverage longitudinal data through collecting data through convenience samples, but wanting to be able to translate that information directly from that patient from naturalistic settings. And so while we may not be able to conduct clinical trials that meet the same thresholds of rigor for regulatory evidence at this stage, I think it's still important to be able to collect pilot data that represents a humanistic viewpoint.
Thank you. And Av, so with your expertise in regenerative organic farming and traditional medicines, what do you see as the best innovations and tools moving forward?
Well, so even the language of this panel, in terms of the title and even in that question, I think just to follow Marnay's comments, we do have to question like the use of the word science.
And what's so funny is I printed out what you had sent me,
Yep.
and just your first sentence was magnificent. Can I read it?
Sure.
Okay. Science and ingenuity are not neutral words. They hold power and privilege. They're often used to suggest progress and advancement and to dismiss traditional knowledge and subculture knowledge, especially the work of citizen scientists for thousands of years in the case of cannabis. And I thought that was I'm like, did he just write that? Or did that if you just spun that off the head?
Well, and even in your introduction for yourself, I see you as a social scientist, right? And I think we're at that level that we're trying to decolonize that word science because it has been usurped, and we forget the fact that we've had citizen scientists for thousands of years, especially
I'm
with
gonna
this
get
medicine.
a shirt.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put it on my resume.
Absolutely.
Stoner citizen scientist.
Yes.
There we go.
Listen.
Yeah, exactly. So and even innovation, that's one of those words because to me, something that's innovative is something that's been tried, tested, and true.
Yes.
Yet what we often consider innovative in academia or in the academy and universities is something that's novel, right? So something like genetic engineering and specifically some gene editing techniques, they're very ingenious, but I don't think they're necessarily innovative because they haven't been tried, tested, and true.
That's a great point.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we're going to get
I
into
don't think
some
I
more...
answered your question about...
But we're going to get
we'll
into some
there.
more stuff, but I love where you're going because the fact that you merge the worlds of traditional medicines and the research, and which you would think are two different things, but one just predated the other.
Right.
So that's fantastic. Thank you. Twinkle. So how has coming from public health and analytical chemistry and your analytical chemistry background changed your perspective on the medicinal values of unique strains and unique effects?
So I think at the heart of this question, questions about unique strains really come down to just differences in biodiversity in the plant, or like chemical diversity, which is basically just to say that different strains are made of different things, and all those different things have very specific roles in how we feel. And so that's the number one thing that I've learned from public health, is that public health is such a broad term, but what we're really doing is looking at 8 billion people who all have different systems in their body and different experiences in the world and different, ways. In the last panel, they were just talking about all the different ways someone can smoke the same joint. And so what we really need to do is just be collecting data as much as we can so that we can look for trends in specific populations that we want to see. And that is what is how public health is traditionally looked at too. We look at the broad data and then we look in a very specific group to see if those trends still apply.
Okay.
And we see that, and that's a very classic way to approach things analytically. And so, we are doing that. Right now, my job is doing that chemically, looking in the plant for those small trends that then apply to big trends. And we do that in public health too. So I feel like a lot of science, whatever we call it, is just looking for trends, which is exactly what people do automatically when they are experiencing things. We're looking for patterns. Especially neurodivergent people love to look for patterns, and they want to know how they're going to feel every time, and they want to be able to predict these things. And the only way that we can find out more information about how specific strains affect specific people is by doing that research and including, community-driven research.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Wow, I have more questions, but I'll wait till. And last but not least, Stephen, how has your experience as a Marine Corps veteran and a D1 athletic trainer influenced your focus on cannabis and athletes?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to my original statement of why I always say that I'm a Marine Corps veteran first. I was raised as a DARE kid. In order for me to graduate 5th grade, I actually had to sing the DARE song on stage. So It's very much programmed into us that these things are bad. My high school was the first high school in the state of Illinois to start drug testing kids. It was not random. We knew who was getting drug tested. Mm-hmm. And then I joined the Marines, which obviously drug testing. So I've seen this theme, and there's no data that shows drug testing to be an adequate tool for harm reduction or for education. So there's nothing that supports more drug testing as something that will actually help.
Right.
So that being said, when I came back from deployment and I had a broken leg and I got a lot of opioids and I had friends that had just come back from combat and we were losing them to mental health related ailments.
Yeah.
So this gave me enough confidence to say that if we don't have an enemy outside that's as powerful as the enemy within, there's a deep path that has to be sought out. And as a Marine Corps veteran, knowing how it affects athletes and knowing how these type of stresses and traumas, because people don't realize the number 2 cause of death in the NCAA is actually suicide.
Oh, wow.
So these are the peak athletes in our country. They're young people, right? They typically come from some type of support background, and that's the second cause of death, right? So I think it's very important that we merge what my field of study is, high performance populations.
Yes.
These are our healthcare workers, our nurses and our doctors during COVID. These are our first responders and our EMT. They all receive similar physiological, psychological, and social stressors.
Right.
So that's why I think it's really important that athletes have this high profile, because you can be an artist and consume cannabis and not get ridiculed the way an athlete
100%.
does.
Yes.
So I think it's really important. The work that I do with Enzisha Consulting and our business, we work with a lot of athletes to actually educate them to feel empowered so they can change the narrative of their conversation.
That's great.
So doing that with veterans and athletes that's my passion. That I wouldn't be in this industry if that wasn't my reason.
I love it. Thank you. Okay, so we're just gonna, if you want to start, but I'd love everyone to chime in. So your journey into science. What the question is, each of you share unique experiences. How did your background guide you into cannabis research? And I'll start, and we'll go back this way or wherever you want to chime in.
Okay. I kind of hinted to it, alluded to it, so I'll save the good part of my story for the later questions.
Okay.
So during COVID, when people saw NCAA games being suspended, sports games being cut off, in my mind, I knew absolutely that the NCAA could not come out of this unscathed. You see it now with the NIL deals and athletes making money. You see teams changing conferences. Those are money problems. So what I decided was, if athletes were suffering through the same mental stress that I was as a veteran, and I was able to have a medical card and justify it, that's kind of the transition to,
Okay. So my question is it's going to sound cheeky, but did your mom be like, are you seriously going to pursue a career in cannabis? Or was it because it was rooted in science? Mm-hmm. Did that validate it?
I say this jokingly, but I also say this seriously. My business partner and I, we grew up in the same church together.
Okay.
So heavily ridiculed for any type of consumption. It's very interesting, and it may just be my household, but if you show success and confidence in what you're doing, I realize your parents, they don't always care as much as you think they care.
Okay.
And I think when my mom understood where I was coming from, like, the PTSD and suicide numbers are a secret.
Right.
So as my driving force, like, I don't think anybody's in my way.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah, she supported me.
My family was not as excited as yours was. Twinkle?
So when I was studying, I originally was studying chemistry to be a vet and work with animals. And I had, wanted to do pharmacy originally. And then my mom had a really negative experience with pharmaceuticals when she was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And I was really young. This was like during my formative years in high school. And my mom was misdiagnosed and like mistreated with steroids, which are not, the type of drugs that we like commonly think about as really harmful drugs that could have long-lasting negative effects. But that really, watching how the Western medicine system wanted to explore treatment and diagnosis with medication first really changed my perspective on going into the pharmaceutical industry. And that was right when I was getting into school. So I went to school to become a vet, and then after working in the vet industry, like I decided not to do that. And then I was like, well, I'm going to work in public health because I feel like this is like a good neutral thing. So then I started working in tobacco research. And I had long been a consumer before that. And I kind of, in my mind, was like, well, tobacco and cannabis, like in the federal government's eyes, like these two things aren't as different as, all of us as cannabis enthusiasts and advocates know that it's not the same. But in also in a lot of chemical ways, in analytical chemistry, there are a lot of similarities that we can draw from that research. So I started working in public health, and I instantly fell in love with the, I guess, quality control aspect, which is kind of a weird thing to really love. But the fact that, you can set specific guidelines and we can look at data and make real world conclusions about that and see how data year after year changes and how the population's health increases and decreases as a result of trends with tobacco is something that I thought was just super fascinating, because when else do you get to look at such large scale data populations? This research has been funded for decades, well funded for decades. So that was really interesting to me. And then after working there for a while, I was like, well, I want to bring some of this skill set to the cannabis industry because I just love cannabis. And I know I can see all the steps where quality control in a cannabis making industry would be essential. And so little old me, naive to the industry, I started working in a testing lab, and I just learned everything I could. I worked on almost every piece of equipment that they had, all the instrumentation, and just got really good at doing that, and then started working at Abstracts. And now I'm actually in a position to kind of bring it all back around to public health and safety and do new research with where I started, and which was always the ultimate goal. So
I'm excited to see, I really am excited do you have any, I'd love to hear, what was your background? Did it have any influence?
Well, yeah, I did not grow up in a cannabis-friendly home. Not that it was frowned upon, we just didn't bring it up.
Sure.
I did my formative years. I had a picture of Lord Shiva above my bed, and I give honor to Lord Shiva most times when I'm consuming. But that really didn't play much of a role in terms of trying to convince my parents that getting into cannabis is good research. It really just a choice in terms of as an agronomist, just loving plants.
Yes.
I fell in love with the cannabis plant, and this is even before I was consuming it.
Okay.
Just to watch this plant, knowing what it can do. It is an amazing plant, and it's so easy to fall in love with. So that was kind of my pathway into cannabis.
Okay.
But most of my teachers were organic farmers, so that's the work that I did first. And as I helped them with their tomatoes and zucchinis or or their Hereford cattle, they would pull me aside and say, "Hey, can you take a look at these plants?" And that was my opportunity to learn more about cannabis.
That's
And then because I'm a soil scientist, I started developing just add water soils and super soils, living soils, and that's how I actually entered into the industry. Yeah.
Thank you. Marnay?
Well, I think, truthfully, when I was working at the New York City Department of Health after COVID, managing my role as a principal investigator for an HIV prevention initiative and being activated to support the New York City's response to COVID, I found myself at a peak state of anxiety and stress that I just started to consume cannabis more. So much so that I really wanted to pivot from my current role, and I was ready to quit without having anything lined up to preserve my mental health, but wanted to say, this is an opportunity for me to actually learn more and apply my skill set in building the evidence base for medical cannabis. And I began my quest and ended up finding a role at Vireo Health, and I was so thankful for the opportunity to contribute to their work in pharmacovigilance for medical cannabis. And that exposed me to the medical market in Maryland, and I'm originally from Maryland, and it was a wonderful opportunity to marry, I think, a plant that served its role to save my life in a high peak stress moment that lasted for a few years. That I was able to honor that love and passion and dedicate my skill set to advance the evidence base and bring legitimacy to the lived experience of generations of my family members and other members of the community. So I did not come from a cannabis-friendly household either, came from a household that also suffers from addiction. And so that was a perspective of any substance use, whether that be alcohol despite me wanting to serve my best effort and establish healthy habits for myself, my cannabis consumption is non-negotiable. I think it's actually a crucial, integral element to my wellness. And so I think that's just how I approach my life, and I want to be able to honor that and be able to bring a voice to other individuals that share that experience.
Thank you. What I noticed from everyone's response is your entering into this space was pretty much fueled by passion or your lived experiences, which I really love, Okay, my next question is, and I think one of the reasons that I'm here is to be that non-scientist translator of sorts, but you thank you for being kind and not using like 18-letter words. I appreciate that. But in your work, how do you translate your complex science findings into like insights that you share or products that you develop?
This is probably the most fun thing that I do,
Okay.
because given recent changes with the NFL, the NCAA,
Yes.
The conversations that I can have with athletes are a little more than, I know this helps me so I get high. So like tomorrow we'll have Ricky Williams here at 1:30. I built a relationship with Rick. He started working with our consulting company because we realized that if we could teach them that there's plants that make cannabinoids,
Yes.
but your body also makes cannabinoids, it totally changed the conversation, because athletes like supplements. They like nutrition.
Yes,
they like
that's
these different
true.
things. So that's how you kind of make that translational conversation. And hey, we're not just talking about you as an athlete, I get high, I feel better.
Right.
You're like, hey, you've told me about studies where people are depressed or stressed out and their natural cannabinoid levels are low.
Right.
And I'm almost supplementing my natural levels, which you would do with vitamin D or vitamin C, anything else. So that's kind of how I translate that conversation.
Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in there?
I think you said it with all of us. We're also passionate about this plant, and so for me, it's incredibly easy because I'm talking to passionate growers.
Yes.
And the conversations just flow, and it's amazing. And there's I think when you get to that level, there's no difference between teacher and student. It's just we're just riffing. It's amazing.
I love that. That's great. So, all right, I just want to jump into my other question because I don't want to lose my train of thought. So there was one question that we were going to wait, but I wanted to just hit it. What was one major gap in research or understanding that you think, if solved, could drastically change how cannabis is used or understood? I'm going to repeat it because that was a good one.
Yeah.
What's one major gap in research or understanding that you think, if solved, could drastically change how cannabis is used or understood? I'm going to start with you, Twinkle.
I feel like the most obvious answer is like the entourage effect and how we can correlate specific compounds with specific effects or specific moods. And a lot of these like populations that use cannabis medicinally, like high performance people, people on the neurodivergent spectrum, like we know that they already have different systems and different responses than the average population. And so if we ever want to be able to make substantial claims in specific regard to that, we have to know how it affects everybody too. And so that's like the number one thing that I think once we figure that out, and a key part of that is like an accurate, reasonable way to measure that and study it, there's like some gaps in technology there, then we are like opening an entirely new door into research and understanding of that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in there?
I think a dream of mine would be understanding what formulations of cannabinoids could synchronize well with current anti-cancer therapies to help more actively and proactively resolve side effect issues. And so I think there are various antiemetic regimens that could be built based upon cannabinoids and integrate well and be complementary to other pharmacological agents. But there's a matter of political will, being open to investing in that type of regulatory grade evidence generation. And so I ultimately think that there's a multitude of applications for the plant in managing cancer-related modalities, but also in drug delivery platform system technology. I'm really, really curious to hear more about that innovation. And so, yeah,
Thank you.
I'd love that.
All right. So with whether it's medical breakthroughs, sustainable practices, or new products, what developments do you see having the most impact?
And I'll try to tie in a little bit of the last question with this answer as well, because I feel like we still don't really understand the plant, and we haven't. We're in such a rush to do everything to. Mainly with these two chemicals, right?
Yes.
CBD, THC, we're focused on those two, and we really don't understand the plant. And I think Twinkle's research has really highlighted how little we know. I feel like we still need to learn how to grow the plant, right?
Yes.
We jumped into a somewhat legalized world of cannabis out of prohibition, and we just copied the methodology that was used when you had to hide how you were growing it, right?
Yes.
So we've created an incredibly unsustainable system of growing cannabis. So I feel like we need to step back and actually learn this plant, learn what it can do for us beyond just perhaps medicine, and then slowly.
Do you think that's possible based on where we are now to be able to like hit pause?
Yeah, great question. Great question. As a pessimist about our species, I would say no. I think because we have some amazing tools, we have the ingenuity of artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, genetic engineering, that we're going to take this plant and we're going to start implementing those technologies on it. But in fact, the challenge will be, and it'll be citizen scientists, I feel, who are going to pull us back and say, oh, wait a bit, we forgot about this. Much like we did during Prohibition, where we started reducing certain terpenes, and now we're bringing those terpenes back because we're allowed to bring those terpenes back. We will go back and say, oh, don't forget about flavorants. Right, so I think
you're right.
It'll be us who pull that back, or
I hope so, and I think maybe in smaller circles, as opposed to the big industry, maybe in those smaller circles, that could be done?
I would say something that I've noticed is very interesting, coming from the NCAA, doing plant research for 4 to 5 years, I actually felt out of my topic.
Okay.
What's funny is I find out that there's neuroscientists, that there are people from all different backgrounds. Anybody in my field, human performance, who's interested in nutrition, they would go look at that plant or that food. So when you meet people where they are, it doesn't actually sound like I'm talking to them about cannabis. I'm talking to them about something that the person they train or coach is going to ingest.
Right.
They look at it as an opportunity to then learn something, and it's like, hey, this is bears have an endocannabinoid system, but bears aren't consuming cannabis. It sounds like a funny fact, but that's one of those party conversations that really open people's minds more expansive outside of just cannabis. And I think cannabis does need some assistance because we don't really acknowledge as much like our endocannabinoid system is what is really contributing. We're supplementing or adding to the system. And I think as we learn more about the system itself, I think the plant will actually have a space that's safe from kind of the rapid recreational modern legalization kind of format.
Okay, so we all know that we're all passionate people. We love what we do. The question is, how does your work give back to the communities that you represent?
Let me start first.
I'm going to start, Marnay.
Well, I think it's really recognizing how the knowledge that's gained can be a tool for empowering themselves in their macro and micro environment. And so I think it's a matter of shifting your perspective from understanding and encouraging folks to be a citizen scientist. And so most of my work is evidence generation based in the sense of generating insights that are shared either on national or local or international settings and translating that into evidence that helps to seek a regulatory need or a business need. And I think oftentimes that's really disheartening to know sometimes that while we are trying to champion individuals to participate in these studies, that there are sometimes other interests that control the lens through which these research questions are being answered. And so I say that all as a caveat and a disclaimer to know that it's also supplementing that time by really volunteering. And what I've been enjoying my contributions to the Scientific Advisory Board at the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy is that we're still finding opportunities to leverage the scientific method to seek out our community, to be a resource and collaborate and conduct these studies that we build the evidence base that may not necessarily be supported to have that infrastructure exist now. And so really just wanting to leverage abilities for data collection in the naturalistic settings to drive policy change.
Thank you.
For the most part, what I try to do and what I did with organic farmers, a lot of it is trying to build social capital within our community. So it's trying to put on conferences, bringing growers together. Just the simple act of bringing growers or farmers together, we start having those conversations and whatnot. I think it's important to also do what we're doing right now with this panel in terms of bringing race and genders to the forefront and making sure that that is part of the discussion. So we don't separate it from cannabis agronomy, but we look at it as just part of that and keep pushing that envelope, because the cannabis industry unfortunately is no different than the rest of society, and it suffers from the systemic discrimination that we see throughout. So bringing that to the forefront as well is just an important role that I think we all play very well. So.
Yes. Twinkle, anything?
Yeah, I feel like the main way that the work that I'm doing right now brings back to the community is through education. And so now that we are able to do this research, we're also trying to find out, work with people in the community so that they can get access to these tools, and then also just educating about it so that we can have more discussions, so that not only do I know as an analytical chemist, but now we have growers that know, and other advocates for the plant, patient advocates, and other infectious disease informals, everybody can know about this information. And
Yes.
And as you mentioned before, how can we translate these really difficult technical concepts? And what we need to do and what we all do is eventually meet people where they are at the end of the day. And, I might know a lot of really cool chemical information, but sometimes when I'm talking to a grower, they don't need to know the names of the compounds. They just need me to convey the message to them, and I don't need to go on a big spiel about it. And we can get the information across without having to bombard them with everything.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate it because, like I said earlier, this transferable information, or the information when it's made transferable, it's really impactful to a consumer, a medical patient, to understand, and honestly, for the medical field, when you have to deal with practitioners, there's a lot of stigma in medicine, as I'm sure you all would agree. Having that information, sometimes the patient has to educate the doctor, So in that role, having this real science information that you can say, hey, I know that you're the doctor here, but look what I read. Here, check this out. It just makes you feel empowered as a person, as a consumer, even as an entrepreneur, So thank you for that. Stephen?
Yeah, I think obviously to start off, I give back a lot with public education.
Yes.
So I write for Sports Cannabis. I have a lot of public information that I give out, trying to bridge some of the most up-to-date science with the athletic science that we already kind of know. I would also say I'm a board member for Minority Cannabis Business Association.
Okay.
So that's something that's really important to me because my business partner and I are both from the south side of Chicago. And I think something that we don't necessarily understand is when we see current Chicago on the news, people always ask me what's going on, and I say the war on drugs worked.
It absolutely did.
So if you can justify using taxpayer dollars to go through black and brown neighborhoods, saying that you're looking for criminals, that is a rinse and repeat model that works. So I think it's really important that the people from our neighborhoods understand Chicago has more MSOs than any other state. That's the capital of all the MSOs. So I think it's very interesting that the headquarters of the war on drugs is also the headquarters of the multi-state cannabis operators. So it's very important to make sure that people in our communities understand what's being built. Because I always look back and go, I wish I was a little older when Google and Amazon happened, so I understood more. So now with this industry, I just want to make sure that people from our neighborhoods understand as much as they can.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. I'm going to start to wrap up, but I do have one more question if I have enough time for, I think I might. Do I have enough? Do it? Okay, cool. So what does your specific communities need in the space to change, and how can you envision that happen? Like what needs, you mentioned something about pushing needles. If you had the magic wand to push a needle forward, what would you be pushing forward?
I guess I can say what I am pushing forward. My consulting company is currently working with MM411 to develop a course for college athletes. The NCAA recently removed cannabinoids from their banned substance list, but they didn't actually provide individual schools education. And if you read the fine print, it actually says that every NCAA school is responsible for educating their athletes.
Wow. Okay. Problem solution, right?
Correct. So we're developing a course called ACEs, it's athletes, cannabinoids, and the endocannabinoid system. But that is a very specific way that we can provide that education to that audience.
Pushing it forward. Twinkle?
I think that if we can do anything to help empower other scientists in the industry to publish their information and publish their research, because we all know that there's a lot of money and time spent in R&D in the industry already. It's not that it's not happening, but taking that information public and giving it to the manufacturers and the consumers and the bud tenders and everyone so that we can all be informed and pushing our knowledge base forward would be like the number one thing. And so like the direct ways we can do that are like there are organizations that will help you, write your research papers and edit them, and you have the answers already in your hands. You just have to do the last little bit.
And we have to talk, because I think there needs to be a study on cannabis and menopause.
Yeah.
I'm asking for a friend, but yes.
Yeah.
Across life stages. Yes.
It needs to happen. There's nothing.
Great question.
Yeah. So, Av?
And Ethan Rousseau is doing some work with Carrie Cutler around looking at that as well.
Okay.
So, with CBG. Well, of course, representing the Scotian Cannabis Alliance, cannabis tax reform in Canada is a necessity, and that would be something that of course I would push. But if we're playing a little fantasy game here, I would like to, to me the gift that cannabis brings is one of restoration, and it allows us to relax and hopefully reflect. I would love the academy, the universities and researchers to actually celebrate that gift and maybe relax, take a pause on the new ingenious ways of looking at the plant and just learn the plant. And so that'd be my wand.
Thank you.
I think building off of that, to ultimately see cannabis rescheduled and ultimately remove or seek to remove some systematic barriers that exist to accessing plant-touching material, to understand different formulation types, different product types, and their impact on different safety and efficacy markers. And so I do think that there is an opportunity for us to transform the current clinical research development pipeline, but also opportunities for intersectionality and building upon past hurts as a tool for restoration, honestly, of how we can integrate naturalistic setting use and build on hundreds and really ultimately thousands of different applications to bring to a consumer's front door. And so I think that there is a need for fundamental political will paradigm shifts.
Thank you. Okay, so you are so great. I want to keep talking. So as we wrap up, what is one takeaway that you would like to leave the audience with about the future of cannabis science and the future of advocacy? You could pick one or the other. What would you like to say about one takeaway for the audience?
I think sometimes when people hear me talk about human performance and health and wellness, they just hear sports and fitness. I think we're actively moving to the point in society where people want to take control of their individual health and wellness. So I don't think that's recreational. I don't think that's medical. I think people are learning more about themselves, and that's making them be more conscious about every single thing that they do. So that's kind of what I think that the cannabis industry is actually opening people's minds, similar to the example you gave of a experience that you have, but that then moves you forward, kind of down that path.
Thank you. What's one takeaway for the future of cannabis science?
I think that once we start looking more holistically at cannabis instead of just all these different parts about it, THC percent, aroma percent, we're going to be in a lot better position to give people what they actually need from the plant.
Thank you.
Hard to build on those two beautiful answers. I really just want people to have that opportunity to grow a plant and then fall in love with that plant. So
I'm going to try this year.
Yeah,
I'm going to put some seeds in the ground.
Yeah,
I'm going to give it a shot. So, Marnay?
I think lastly, to stay inspired, I think there's a lot of intentional sabotaging and systems in place to still your joy and also your spirit and your inquisitive nature. And so I think that's fundamental in terms of how you can champion yourself as a citizen scientist, but also how your daily life can contribute to a future that you want to live in. Yes. And that's my remit as well.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Again, thrilled to be connected with each of you. Thank you for all your contributions, and I'm planning on staying in contact so I could be on this future stuff when we start doing it. Thank you. All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.